The huge metal doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep hum. Ambassador Jake Morrison walked through them with slow, steady steps. His black boots clicked on the shiny floor as he moved toward the center of the room. Behind him, Lieutenant Sophie Blake followed closely, carrying a small device that recorded everything. The chamber was enormous. It stretched up so high that the ceiling disappeared into shadows. Around the curved walls, hundreds of seats held beings from across the galaxy. Some looked like giant insects, with clicking sounds coming from their mouths. Others were tall and thin, with skin that changed colors. Few floated in the air inside, clear bubbles filled with strange gas. Jake had been coming to this place for 3 years now. Each time, he felt smaller. Not because of the size of the room, but because of the way the other beings looked at him. Their eyes showed the same thing every time. They thought humans were nothing special. Ambassador Morrison, a voice boomed across the chamber. It came from Veltar, the main speaker for the Karathi people. He was 8 feet tall with 4 arms and a head that looked like a praying mantis. His voice sounded like metal scraping. "Against stone, you are late." Jake stopped in the center of the room. A bright light shone down on him from above. "My apologies, Speaker Veltar. My transport was delayed by a security check." "Security checks are necessary," Veltar replied. His large black eyes stared down at Jake. "Humans have shown they cannot be trusted to follow simple rules." Whispers filled the chamber. Jake could hear dozens of different languages being spoken at once. Some sounded like music. Others sounded like machines breaking down. But he understood the tone. They were all talking about humans. And none of it was good. Sophie stepped closer to Jake. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and nervous eyes. This was only her second time in the council chamber. "Sir," she whispered, "maybe we should record this differently." Jake shook his head slightly. "No changes. Record everything exactly as it happens." A new voice spoke up. This one belonged to Zephyrian delegate Diska. The Zephyrians looked almost human, but their skin was blue and they had no hair anywhere on their bodies. "We have called this emergency session to address the growing problem of human expansion." Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his face calm. He had learned long ago that showing emotion in this place was seen as weakness. In the past 2 years, the Ziska continued, humans have established 47 new colonies. This is more than any other species has built in the past century. This rapid growth threatens the balance of power in our galaxy. "Balance of power?" Jake asked. His voice was quiet, but it carried clearly through the chamber. "Or balance of control." Veltar's forearms moved in what Jake had learned was a sign of anger among the Korathi. "Ambassador Morrison, you will speak only when given permission." "I apologize," Jake said. But his tone made it clear he was not really sorry. The hegemony representative spoke next. The hegemony were warriors who controlled 12 star systems. Through fear and violence, their delegate was a massive creature, covered in thick, armor-like skin. "Humans are dangerous," he said in a voice that sounded like rocks falling. "They fight too well. They build weapons too quickly. Ask too many questions." Sophie made a small sound of surprise. Jake glanced at her and saw that her face had gone pale. She was beginning to understand what this meeting was really about. "Council has made a decision," Veltar announced. "We have voted on new rules that will apply to all human colonies and settlements." Jake waited. He had expected this moment for months. The messages from Earth had been clear. President Lisa Carter had told him exactly what to do if this happened. First, Veltar continued, "No new human colonies may be established beyond the Outer Rim territories. Any attempts to build settlements in the inner systems will be stopped by Council forces." The chamber fell silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Second, all human military ships must be fitted with power limiters. These devices will prevent your weapons from reaching full strength. Council inspectors will check every human vessel to make sure these limiters are working. Jake felt Sophie's hand touch his arm. She was scared. He could not blame her. These rules would cripple humanity's ability to defend itself. Third, all human trade must be approved by the Council before it can happen. No human merchant can sell goods to any species without written permission from this body. And fourth, Veltar's voice grew louder. All human research into advanced technology must be shared with the Council. No human scientist may work on any project without council supervision. The silence that followed was complete. Jake stood in the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of hundreds of alien eyes on him. These beings had just told him that humanity was no longer free. "What is your response, Ambassador?" Eltar asked. Jake looked up at the speaker. For a moment, he thought about all the things he could say. He could argue that these rules were unfair. He could point out that humans had never attacked any council member. He could remind them that human doctors had saved millions of alien lives, that human engineers had built the technology that powered half the galaxy. But he knew it would not matter. These beings had made up their minds long ago. They saw humans as a threat that needed to be controlled. "I understand the council's position," Jake said finally. "We will comply with these new regulations." He paused, letting his words sink in. Around the chamber, he could see some of the delegates relaxing. They thought they had one. However, Jake continued, "I formally request a recess to consult with Earth's leadership." Veltar's head tilted to one side. "How long do you need?" 1 week should be sufficient. Very well. The session is adjourned for 7 days. We will reconvene to hear Earth's official response. As the delegates began to file out of the chamber, Jake stood perfectly still. Sophie moved closer to him. "Sir," she whispered, "what are we going to do?" Jake looked at her with tired eyes. In his jacket pocket, he carried a small device that had been given to him by President Carter herself. On it was a single message, just 2 words long. He had memorized those words months ago, hoping he would never need to use them. "Sophie," he said quietly, "we're going to do exactly what they asked us to do." She looked confused. "But sir, these rules will destroy us." Jake smiled for the first time in hours. It was not a happy smile. "No, Sophie. These rules will destroy them." As they walked toward the exit, Jake pressed a small button on the device in his pocket. Somewhere in space, a message was being sent to every human colony, every human ship, every human outpost in the galaxy. The message contained only 2 words, but they would change everything. It's time. Within hours, the most carefully planned operation in human history would begin. The council thought they had won. They thought they had put humanity in its place. They had no idea that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. Jake Morrison walked out of the council chamber for the last time. Behind him, the delegates continued their discussions, planning how they would manage their new human subjects. None of them noticed that the humans were already gone. Captain Alex Turner was drinking his morning coffee when the message arrived. He was sitting in the command chair of his ship, the Meridian, watching the stars through the main window. His crew was busy with their usual morning tasks. Everything seemed normal. The communication officer, a young woman named Lisa Park, looked up from her screen with a confused expression. "Captain, we're getting a priority message. It's encrypted with codes I've never seen before." Alex set down his coffee cup, put it through to my private screen. The message that appeared made his blood run cold. It came directly from Admiral Patricia Cole, the highest-ranking military officer in human space. The message was short, but Alex read it 3 times to make sure he understood. "Operation Silent Dawn is now active. All human assets are to be withdrawn to designated safe zones. Tell no one. Destroy this message after reading. The clock starts now." Alex felt his heart beating faster. Silent Dawn was something every human captain had heard whispered about, but most thought it was just a story. The idea that humanity might one day need to disappear completely seemed impossible. "Lisa," he called to his communication officer, "send a message to all department heads. Tell them to report to my office in 10 minutes. Emergency meeting." As his senior staff gathered in the small office behind the bridge, Alex looked at each face. These people had served with him for 2 years. They trusted him completely. He had to ask them to do something that would change their lives forever. "We've received new orders," he began. "Can't tell you everything, but I need you to trust me. We're going to be leaving this sector immediately." His chief engineer, tall man named Pete Johnson, frowned. "Leave. But we're in the middle of surveying the Kepler system. We've got 6 months of work left here." "The work stops now," Alex said firmly. "Lisa, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them our survey is complete and we're returning to base. Pete, I need you to prepare the ship for a long journey. We might be traveling for weeks." Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's science officer, raised her hand. "Captain, what about our research?" We've discovered 3 new species of space plants. The data could help feed millions of people. Alex felt a pain in his chest. The research was important, but his orders were clear. Pack everything. All data, all samples, everything goes with us. Nothing gets left behind. Over the next few hours, Alex watched his crew work with the efficiency that made humans famous throughout the galaxy. They didn't ask questions, they knew he couldn't answer. They just did their jobs. But the Meridian was just one ship. Across human space, the same scene was playing out on thousands of worlds. On the farming planet of New Kansas, Governor Jenny Walsh received her orders at sunrise. She stood on the porch of her house, looking out over fields of golden wheat that stretched to the horizon. In 3 hours, she would give the order that would empty an entire world. Ma'am, her assistant, a young man named Tony Rivera, approached with a worried look. The transport ships are arriving. The captains are asking where they should land. Jenny closed her eyes for a moment. New Kansas fed 17 different alien species. The wheat, corn, and vegetables grown here kept billions of beings alive. But her orders were clear. Tell them to land in sectors 7 through 12. We'll start with the northern farms and work our way south. What should I tell the workers? Tell them it's an emergency evacuation drill. Tell them they'll be back in a few weeks, but Jenny knew they would never be back. None of them would. The evacuation of New Kansas took 72 hours. Giant ships landed in the fields and loaded everything that could be moved. Farming equipment, stored grain, even the soil samples from the research stations. When they were done, the planet looked like it had never been touched by human hands. On the industrial world of Factory Prime, the process was more complex. Manager Bob Chen had to oversee the dismantling of 300 factories. These facilities produced everything from simple tools to advanced computer systems. Half the galaxy's technology came from Factory Prime. How are we supposed to move entire factory lines? Asked his head of operations, Maria Santos. Carefully, Bob replied. The transport crews have done this before. They know what they're doing. Done. This before? When Bob looked at her with tired eyes. This plan has been in development for 5 years, Maria. Every critical facility has evacuation procedures. Every important person has a destination. We've been preparing for this day since the council first started making threats. The hardest part wasn't moving the equipment. It was explaining to the alien workers why they were being sent home early. Factory Prime employed beings from dozens of species. They had worked alongside humans for years, building friendships and sharing knowledge. What do I tell the Zephyrian engineers? Maria asked. They've been working on the new computer designs for months. Tell them there's been a change in company policy. Give them full pay for the rest of the year and thank them for their service. They're going to ask questions. Let them ask. Just don't give them answers. The medical stations were the most difficult to evacuate. Dr. Ryan Martinez had spent 10 years building the research facility on Kepler Station. His team had developed cures for diseases that had killed millions of aliens. They had created medicines that extended life for dozens of species. Doctor, his assistant, Ellen Davis, found him packing his personal research files. The Thylaurian. Patients in Ward 7 are asking why we're canceling their treatments. Ryan stopped packing and looked at her. The Thylaurians were dying from a genetic disease that only human doctors knew how to treat. Without continued therapy, they would be dead within months. Tell them, Ryan said slowly, that they need to find alternative treatment options. But doctor, there are no alternatives. We're the only ones who know how to help them. I know, Ryan whispered. I know. As the medical station was emptied, Ryan carried with him the knowledge that could save lives. But his orders were clear. Nothing was to be shared with non-humans. Nothing was to be left behind. The pattern repeated across the galaxy, in colonies, that had existed for decades, simply vanished. The beings were loaded onto ships and taken away. The buildings were either dismantled or destroyed. The technology was removed or made useless. On the trading station, Deep Space Nine, Merchant Captain Lucy Brown was loading the last of her cargo when a Korathai trader approached her. Captain Brown, the alien said in broken human language, "Where are all the humans going?" My business partner, Jim Williams, was supposed to meet me today. His office is empty.
Ow.
Lucy looked at the alien she had known for 3 years. They had done hundreds of deals together. She had been invited to his family gatherings. His children called her Aunt Lucy. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't know where Jim went." It was a lie, but it was a necessary one. The most impressive part of the operation was how quiet it was. There were no news reports, no official announcements, no panic. Humans simply stopped showing up where they were expected to be. The first aliens to notice were the ones who worked closest with humans. Zephyrian scientists arrived at research labs to find them empty. Karathi merchants came to trade meetings that never happened. The Lorian patients went to medical appointments with doctors who were no longer there. At first, the aliens thought it was just coincidence. Maybe the humans were having some kind of internal problem. Maybe it was a temporary situation that would be fixed soon. But as days passed, the truth became clear. The humans weren't coming back. Captain Alex Turner stood on the bridge of the Meridian as they approached the hidden base in the Veil Nebula. Around him, thousands of other human ships were arriving at secret locations throughout the galaxy. The greatest evacuation in history was almost complete. Captain Lisa Park said from her station, "We're receiving a message from the base. They're asking for our final count." Alex looked at his crew. They had all done their jobs perfectly, even though they didn't fully understand what was happening. "Tell them," Alex said, "that the Meridian and all her crew have arrived safely. Tell them that our part of the operation is complete." As the ship docked at the hidden base, Alex knew that the galaxy would never be the same. The Council had wanted to control humanity. Instead, they had lost them completely. The silence had begun. Speaker Veltar stood at the large window in his office, looking out at the busy space around the Council station. Ships from dozens of worlds came and went, carrying goods and people across the galaxy. But something was wrong. He had been watching for an hour, and he had not seen a single human ship. "Assistant Mordok," he called to the young Karathi who served as his aide. "When was the last time a human vessel requested docking permission?" Mordok checked his data pad. His forearms moved quickly over the controls. "I cannot find any human ships in the past 6 days. Speaker, that is, ... unusual." Veltar's large black eyes narrowed. 6 days ago was when Ambassador Morrison had left to consult with Earth's leadership. The human had seemed calm, almost calm, when he accepted the Council's new rules. "Contact the human embassy," Veltar ordered. "I want to speak with Ambassador Morrison immediately." 20 minutes later, Mordok returned with a confused look on his face. "Speaker, the human embassy is closed. There is a sign on the door that says they have suspended operations temporarily." "Suspended operations?" Veltar's voice rose to a harsh screech. "What does that mean?" "I do not know, Speaker. The building appears to be empty across the galaxy. Similar conversations were happening on dozens of worlds." The Zephyrian scientist Dr. Kithen arrived at the research center on Proxima Station to find the human laboratories completely empty. Not just empty of people, but empty of everything. The equipment was gone. The research data had been wiped. Even the furniture had been removed. "This makes no sense," she said to her assistant, a young Zephyrian named Pollars. "Yesterday, Dr. Ryan Martinez was here working on the cure for blood fever. Today, it is as if he never existed." Pollars checked the security recordings. The last entry shows Dr. Martinez leaving the building 3 days ago, but he was carrying several large cases. The recording shows him loading them onto a transport ship. "Did he say where he was going?" "No, Doctor. He just said goodbye to the security guard and left." Dr. Kithen felt a cold fear growing in her stomach. Blood fever was killing thousands of her people every month. Dr. Martinez had been only weeks away from completing a cure. Without him, without his research, their species would continue to die. On the agricultural world of Ceres, the Velinary trader this DS stood in an empty warehouse that should have been full of grain. His people depended on food from this world. To survive, the Velinary could not grow their own crops. Their home planet was too cold and dry. For 50 years they had bought grain from human farmers on Ceres. "Where is Farmer Johnson?" he asked the empty air. "Where is the grain? Where is everyone?" The human farms stretched for thousands of miles across the planet's surface. But now they were all empty. The fields were still there, but there were no farmers, no workers, no equipment. Even the buildings had been stripped clean. The Ziska's communication device buzzed. It was a message from his government. The same thing was happening on every world, where his people bought food. All the human suppliers had vanished at the same time. Emergency food supplies will last 60 days, the message said. Find new sources immediately or face mass starvation. In the council chambers, an emergency session was called. Representatives from 23 species filled the great room, all asking the same questions. Where were the humans? Why had they all disappeared at once? What did it mean? This is clearly a negotiation tactic, declared the hegemony representative, a massive warrior named Groktar. The humans are trying to pressure us into changing the new rules. Negotiation tactic? Squeaked the Velinary delegate, a small being named Minthus. My people will starve in 2 months if we cannot buy human food. Then find food somewhere else, Groktar replied, with no concern in his voice. The galaxy does not revolve around human farmers. But finding food somewhere else was proving impossible. The Karathi had tried to buy grain from their traditional suppliers, only to discover that most of those suppliers got their seed stock from human colonies. Without new seeds, they could not grow crops. The Zephyrians had attempted to replace human medical supplies with products from other species. But human medicine was more advanced than anything else in the galaxy. Their drugs worked better, their surgical techniques saved more lives. Their diagnostic equipment could detect diseases that no one else could find. We need to contact Earth directly, suggested the Thalorian representative, an elderly being named Velsan, surely their government. We'll be reasonable, Veltar nodded. I will send a message to President Carter immediately. The message was sent using the fastest communication system in the galaxy. It would reach Earth in just a few hours. Council waited for a response. 3 days later, they were still waiting. Perhaps they did not receive it, suggested Mordok. Send it again, Veltar ordered. Use all available channels. More messages were sent. Official diplomatic requests, urgent trade inquiries. Even personal appeals from aliens who had been friends with humans for years. None of them received answers. It was as if humanity had simply vanished from the universe. The economic effects began to show within 2 weeks. The Galactic Trade Network, which had operated smoothly for centuries, started to collapse. Human merchants had carried goods between species that could not deal with each other directly. Without these middlemen, trade routes that had existed for generations suddenly stopped working. The insectoid hive had always sold their manufactured goods to humans, who then sold them to species that found the hive frightening. Entities produced beautiful art that only humans seemed able to appreciate and market to other species. The Gas Dweller Collective made energy cells that were perfect for human technology, but useless to everyone else. Commander Alina Rodriguez watched the chaos from her hidden base in the asteroid belt. She was one of the last humans to leave the inner systems. Her job had been to make sure that all strategic resources were either removed or destroyed. Status report, she said to her communications officer, Lieutenant Danny Park. All evacuation sites report successful completion, Danny replied. The last transport left Mars base 3 hours ago. All equipment has been either relocated or rendered inoperable, Alina nodded. Mars base had been the center of human military operations in the inner systems. The aliens had always demanded to know what happened there, but humans had never told them. They would never get the chance to find out. What about the monitoring stations? All 17 stations are operational and undetected. We can observe all major alien communication networks without them knowing. Alina smiled grimly. The council thought humans had disappeared, but they were still watching. Every message the aliens sent, every plan they made, every desperate attempt to find humanity was being recorded and analyzed. Any interesting intelligence? Velinary are down to 43 days of food supplies. The Zephyrians have had to close 6 major hospitals because they don't have human medical equipment. The Karathi stock market has dropped by 30%. What about the hegemony? Danny's expression darkened. They're mobilizing their fleets, without human peacekeepers to worry about. They think they can expand their territory. Alina had expected this. Humans had spent decades keeping aggressive species like the hegemony in check. Not through threats or shows of force, but through careful diplomacy and strategic positioning. Human bases had been placed in locations where they could quickly respond to any aggression. Human negotiators had prevented dozens of wars through patient talking and compromise. Now all of that was gone. Sir Danny continued, We're receiving multiple distress calls. The Peaceful Coalition is asking for help against hegemony raids. The Traders Guild wants protection for their cargo ships. The Medical Alliance is begging for human doctors to return. Our response? Nothing. Complete silence, as ordered. Lena walked to the observation deck and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, species that had treated humans as dangerous children were learning what the galaxy was like without them. The lesson was harsh, but perhaps it was necessary. Her communication console buzzed. A priority message from Admiral Cole. Phase 2 will begin in 30 days, the message read. Prepare your teams for long-term observation. The Council must be allowed to fully understand their situation before any contact is resumed. Alina deleted the message and turned back to Danny. Continue monitoring all channels. Record everything and maintain absolute silence. Let them figure it out on their own. The galaxy was learning a hard truth. It had not just lost their human neighbors. It had lost the species that had been quietly holding their civilization together. 2 years had passed since the last human ship had been seen in civilized space. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of her hidden vessel, the Star Hunter, reading the latest intelligence reports. The news was worse than anyone had expected. The Thalorian system, she told her navigation officer, Lieutenant Ben Carter. The main screen displayed a star map, where the Thalorian homeworld should have been shown in blue, indicating a peaceful civilization. There was now a red marker. Red meant the world had fallen to enemy forces. When did it happen? Maria asked quietly. 3 days ago, Ben replied. The hegemony fleet arrived without warning. The Thalorians had no military ships to defend themselves. They surrendered after 6 hours of bombing. Maria closed her eyes. She remembered the Thalorians. They were a peaceful people who spent their time creating beautiful music and studying the stars. They had never hurt anyone. Their only mistake was supporting the Council's decision to restrict human expansion. How many survived? Unknown. The hegemony doesn't usually take prisoners. Maria turned away from the screen. In the past 2 years, she had watched 17 peaceful worlds fall to various aggressive species. Without human peacekeepers to maintain balance, the galaxy had become a very dangerous place. Sir, her communications officer, a young woman, named Amy Johnson, called from her station. We're receiving another distress call. This one is from the Zephyrian Medical Colony on Kepler 7. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was filled with panic. This is Dr. Paulthis of the Kepler 7 Medical Center. We are under attack by unknown raiders. Our defensive systems are failing. We have 3,000 patients who cannot be moved. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help immediately. The transmission cut to static. Amy looked at Maria with hope in her eyes. Captain, we could reach them in 4 hours. The Star Hunter has enough firepower to drive off raiders. Maria stared at the communication panel. Every instinct told her to help. Humans had always been the ones who answered distress calls, who protected the weak, who stood between predators and their prey. But her orders were clear. Continue monitoring, she said finally. But we do not respond. But Captain, ... I said we do not respond. Maria walked to her private office and closed the door. She sat at her desk and put her head in her hands. This was the hardest part of Operation Silent Dawn. Not the leaving, not the hiding, but the watching while innocents suffered. Her computer chimed with an incoming message from Admiral Cole. The message was brief. Status report required. How are our former allies managing without us? Maria began typing her response. The truth was ugly, but it needed to be recorded. The Velenari are down to emergency food reserves. Mass starvation is expected within 3 weeks. Medical system has collapsed entirely. They're using medical techniques that are 50 years out of date. Disease is spreading faster than they can treat it. She paused, then continued typing. The Korathi economy has fallen by 60%. Their stock market crashed when investors realized that 30% of all trade had involved human intermediaries. The Peaceful Coalition has lost 4 member worlds to hegemony aggression. Without human peacekeepers, smaller species cannot defend themselves. But the worst news was yet to come. The crystalline entities have gone completely silent. Our last intelligence suggests their entire civilization has entered some kind of hibernation state to conserve energy. Without human-designed power systems, They cannot maintain their cities. Maria sent the report and leaned back in her chair. She wondered if the alien leaders were beginning to understand what they had lost in the council chambers. Speaker Veltar stood before an emergency assembly. The great room that had once held representatives from hundreds of worlds now contained fewer than 50 delegates. Many species had withdrawn from the council entirely, focusing on their own survival. The situation continues to worsen, Veltar announced to the nearly empty chamber. The Traders Guild reports that galactic commerce has dropped to 20% of previous levels. The Medical Alliance has been forced to close half of all hospitals due to lack of supplies. A small voice spoke from the back of the chamber. It belonged to Minthises, the Velinary delegate. She was much thinner than she had been 2 years ago. Her people's food shortage was affecting everyone, including their government representatives. Speaker Veltar, she said in a weak voice, my government has authorized me to ask once again. Can we not contact the humans? Can we not negotiate? Veltar's forearms moved in the gesture that meant frustration among his people. We have tried everything. We have sent messages to every known human world. We have offered trade agreements, peace treaties, even formal apologies. There has been no response. But surely they must be somewhere, Minthis insisted. Entire. Species cannot just disappear. Can they not? Asked a new voice. It came from Zeknor, a representative of the Intelligence Guild. His species specialized in gathering information. And if anyone knew where the humans had gone, it would be him. What have you discovered? Veltar asked. Ze Kanor activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy. Hundreds of red dots marked the locations of former human colonies and outposts. We have investigated every known human settlement, he said. What we found is ... disturbing. The humans did not simply leave. They erased themselves from existence. The hologram zoomed in on one of the red dots. This was New Kansas, a major agricultural world. When our survey team arrived, we found the planet completely empty. Not just of people, but of everything. Buildings had been dismantled. Equipment had been removed. Even the soil had been treated to remove any trace of human genetic material. Another red dot enlarged. Factory Prime, the industrial center that produced 40% of the galaxies. Technology, again, completely empty, but more than empty. Every piece of manufacturing equipment had been removed or destroyed. The technical manuals had been deleted. Even the waste materials had been cleaned up. Veltar felt a cold fear growing in his stomach. You were saying they planned this? More than planned it, Zeknor replied. They had obviously been preparing for complete withdrawal for years. Every evacuation was carried out with military precision. Nothing was left behind that could be useful to other species. What about their home system? What about Earth? Zeknor's expression became even more serious. We cannot find Earth. Silence filled the chamber. What do you mean, you cannot find it? Veltar demanded. I mean that no one remembers exactly where. The human home system is located. All official records have been destroyed or corrupted. The few aliens who visited Earth are either dead or cannot remember the exact coordinates. The truth was even worse than Zeknor was saying. The humans had been very careful about who they allowed to visit their home worlds. Most aliens had only dealt with human colonies and outposts. Earth itself had been kept secret, visited only by trusted allies who had signed agreements to never reveal its location, and those trusted allies were discovering that their memories of Earth were strangely vague. Some suspected the humans had used advanced technology to blur those memories before they left. So they are truly gone, Minthises said quietly. And we have no way to find them. It appears so, Zeknor confirmed. Veltar looked around the nearly empty chamber. 2 years ago, this room had been full of confident leaders from powerful civilizations. Now it held the desperate representatives of failing worlds. There is more, as Zeknor continued. Our intelligence networks have detected unusual activity in several unexplored regions of the galaxy. Ships that do not match any known design have been spotted at extreme sensor range. They disappear before we can get close enough to identify them. You think the humans are watching us? I think the humans never really left. They just moved somewhere we cannot find them. Back on the Star Hunter, Captain Maria Santos was reading the transcript of the council meeting. Her hidden sensors had recorded every word spoken in the chamber. They're finally starting to understand, she said to Lieutenant Ben Carter. What do you think will happen next? Ben asked. They'll get desperate, really desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things. As if to prove her point, her communications officer called out, "Captain, we're detecting massive fleet movements in the hegemony sectors. It looks like they're preparing for a major offensive." Maria checked her star charts. The hegemony fleets were moving toward the peaceful coalition's remaining worlds. Without human ships to stop them, it would be a massacre. Sir Amy Johnson said quietly, "Those coalition worlds have over 2 billion innocent civilians." Maria stared at the tactical display. 2 billion lives. Men, women, children who had never done anything wrong except trust that someone would protect them. But her orders remained the same. Watch, record, but do not interfere. "Continue monitoring," she said through clenched teeth. "And send a priority. Report to Admiral Cole. The galaxy is about to get much worse." The consequences of humanity's departure were unfolding exactly as predicted. The question was whether the surviving alien civilizations would learn from their mistakes, or if they would destroy themselves completely before the humans decided to return. Either way, Maria knew she would be watching from the shadows, recording every moment of their civilization's collapse. 5 years had passed since humanity vanished from the galaxy. In the council chambers, Speaker Veltar stood before a room that now held only 12 representatives. The great chamber that had once been filled with hundreds of delegates from thriving civilizations was now nearly empty. Veltar looked older. His once proud posture was bent, and his forearms moved slowly, as if they carried great weight. Scars covered his face from the stress of watching his galaxy die. "Fellow representatives," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "we must face the truth we have tried to ignore for 5 years. The galaxy is dying, and we killed it." The few remaining delegates sat in silence. Minthas of the Velinari was no longer there. Her people had all starved to death 2 years ago. The crystalline entities had gone completely dark. Their entire civilization shut down to save energy. The Thylorians existed only as slaves in hegemony work camps. "The numbers are clear," Veltar continued. 17 species have gone extinct since the humans left. Galactic trade has fallen to 5% of what it was. Medical knowledge has been lost. Technology has stopped advancing. We are moving backward into darkness. The Zephyrian delegate, Dr. Sanpaul, raised a shaking hand. "How many dead total?" Veltar checked his datapad. The numbers made him sick. 400 billion beings have died from war, disease, or starvation. Most of these deaths could have been prevented if we still had human doctors, human peacekeepers, human farmers. "What about the hegemony?" asked the delegate from the Traders Guild. "They now control 40% of the galaxy," Veltar replied. "Without human forces to stop them, they have conquered everything they wanted. But even they are suffering. Their economy depends on trade with species they have destroyed." The room fell silent again. Everyone understood what this meant. Hegemony had gained power, but they had inherited a dead galaxy. "There is something else," Veltar said quietly. "Our intelligence services have discovered something disturbing. The humans are still out there." Every head in the room turned toward him. "What do you mean?" Dr. Sanpaul asked. "We have detected signs of human activity in unexplored regions of space, ships that match human design patterns, energy signatures that match human technology. They had been watching us this entire time." The realization hit the room like a physical blow. The humans had not died or disappeared. Had simply moved away and watched their former neighbors destroy themselves. "So they could return?" asked the Traders Guild representative, with hope in his voice. "Could they?" "Yes. Will they?" Veltar shook his head. "Why would they want to return to this?" In the hidden base called Haven Station, Minister Kate Powell sat in her office reading the latest intelligence reports. Through the large window behind her desk, she could see a thriving human city built inside a massive asteroid. Children played in parks, scientists worked in laboratories, farmers grew food in underground gardens. Humanity had not just survived their exodus from galactic civilization. They had thrived. "Ma'am," her assistant, Lieutenant Ben Mitchell, entered the office carrying a datapad. "The latest reports from our monitoring stations?" Kate took the pad and read the summary. The news was as bad as she had expected. 47 distress calls in the past week, she said aloud. 3 more species requesting humanitarian aid. 2 begging for military protection. The Korathi government sent another formal apology, Ben added. They're offering to give humans complete autonomy in exchange for medical assistance. Their plague is spreading faster than they can treat it. Kate set down the datapad and looked out at the human city. 5 years ago, when Operation Silent Dawn began, many humans had questioned whether they were doing the right thing. The plan had seemed cruel, even to those who supported it, but President Carter had been clear in her reasoning. They will never respect us as equals, she had said. They will always see us as dangerous children who need to be controlled. The only way they will understand our value is if they lose us completely. Carter had been right, but the cost had been higher than anyone expected. Ma'am, Ben said carefully, there's something else. We've been monitoring communications from the surviving human colonies. Kate looked up sharply. Not all humans had participated in the exodus. Some colonies had chosen to stay behind, believing they could work within the Council's new restrictions. What's their status? All destroyed or abandoned, Ben said quietly. The ones that tried to stay were either conquered by the hegemony or collapsed when their support networks disappeared. The last holdout, New Tokyo Colony, fell 6 months ago. Kate closed her eyes. Those colonies had been filled with humans who trusted the galactic system. They had believed that cooperation and compromise would protect them. Instead, they had been crushed by the very aliens they tried to appease. How many survivors? Less than 50,000. Most are in refugee camps or working as slaves. The intercom on Kate's desk buzzed. Minister Powell, we have an incoming. Priority transmission from Admiral Cole? Put her through. Admiral Cole's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired, but her voice was firm. Kate, it's time for the final phase. Do you mean contact? No, I mean the message. Kate understood. Immediately. For 5 years, humanity had watched in silence as the galaxy tore itself apart. Now it was time to let the survivors know exactly why it had happened. Broadcasting to all frequencies, every communication system in the galaxy, every species that still exists will hear this message. Kate nodded, prepared the statement. 2 hours later, Kate sat in the Haven Station Communications Center. Round her technicians worked to ensure the message would reach every corner of the galaxy. This would be the first time in 5 years that humans had spoken to their former neighbors. Broadcasting in 10 seconds, announced the chief technician, a woman named Carol Davis. Kate looked into the camera. She thought about all the humans who had died in alien custody. She thought about the species that had supported the Council's restrictions and were now extinct. She thought about the children playing in Haven Station's parks, children who would grow up in a galaxy very different from the one their parents had known. 5 seconds, Carol announced. Kate took a deep breath and began to speak. To the surviving species of the Galactic Council, this is Minister Kate Powell of the Human Federation. For 5 years, you have wondered where we went and why we left. Today, you will have your answer. The message was being received on thousands of worlds. In the council chambers, Veltar and the remaining delegates watched in stunned silence as the human woman continued. 5 years ago, your council decided that humanity was too dangerous to exist freely in the galaxy. You imposed restrictions on our colonies, our military, our trade, and our research. You treated us like children who needed to be controlled. Kate's voice remained calm, but her words cut deep. We gave you exactly what you asked for. You wanted to limit our influence, so we removed it completely. You wanted to control our expansion, so we stopped expanding in your space. You wanted to manage our military, so we took our ships and left. On the Karathi homeworld, Veltar felt his heart sinking as he realized the full truth. The galaxy you now inhabit is the galaxy you chose, Kate continued. A galaxy without human farmers to feed you, without human doctors to heal you, without human peacekeepers to protect you, without human traders to connect you. This is what you wanted in the communication center. Kate could see the data showing how many worlds were receiving the message. Nearly every surviving civilization in the galaxy was listening. You have sent us thousands of messages begging for help. You have offered apologies, trade deals, and treaties. But you have never offered the one thing that might bring us back. Kate paused, letting the tension build. Equality, respect. The simple acknowledgement that humans deserve to be treated as partners, not subjects. She leaned forward, her voice becoming harder. You had the most innovative species in the galaxy working alongside you. You had the most effective peacekeepers in known space protecting you. You had the most productive farmers in the universe feeding you. And you threw it, all away because you were afraid we might become more powerful than you. The message was nearly over, but Kate had one final point to make. Your civilizations are dying because you chose pride over partnership. You chose control over cooperation. You chose fear over friendship. Kate stood up from her chair. Humanity thrives in our new homes among the stars. We have built cities and colonies far from your reach. We have developed technologies you cannot imagine. We have found new friends among species you never knew existed. We do not need you anymore. The camera focused on Kate's face as she delivered the final words. But you need us. You have always needed us. And now you know what happens when you drive away the people who were trying to help you? The transmission ended in the council chambers. Veltar stared at the blank screen for a long time. Around him, the few remaining delegates sat in stunned silence. Finally, Dr. Sanpel spoke. What do we do now? Veltar looked around the empty chamber. 5 years ago, this room had been filled with leaders who thought they ruled the galaxy. Now it held the desperate representatives of dying worlds. Now, Veltar said quietly, we live with what we have done. And we hope that someday, somehow, we might find a way to earn their forgiveness.